Hello, and welcome to the Peaceful Prison Movement podcast. I'm here with Allison Boykin, who I met up at the Gatesville facility here in Texas a few months back and had the pleasure of working with her in that unit while she was incarcerated there. I'd like for her to share a little bit about her experience and to talk about some of the inconsistencies and some of the challenges that people experience in the space of incarceration and the programs that are provided and sometimes or lack thereof. So, Allison, thank you so much for being here, and go ahead and share about your experience, how long you were in Gatesville for, what you experienced, and some of the challenges that came up for you.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful that you're sharing on this topic. I had no idea what I was in for when I agreed to go to a treatment program. Um, I was sentenced to Safe P for 6 months, and I was told that I would probably spend about 30 days in county before I was transferred there. And then I would go to this rehabilitation treatment program where I could get help with my alcoholism. And also, I had issues with abuse and trauma and some other things. And my probation officer had said that this would be a great place to work on all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
I violated my probation by drinking. And I didn't fail a test, anything. I readily admitted that I had consumed alcohol while on probation, which is a violation.
Yeah.
And my probation officer said I needed treatment, and I agreed that I could use the help, and he wanted me to do a 6-month program. And I said, okay. I had been to treatment previous for 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
And after I'd been sober for about a year and a half, I relapsed. I had gone through some pretty traumatic things, and um I had time to prepare because I have two children and a family and a home and a job and everything else, a lot of responsibilities there that I thought, well, I'm going to be gone 6 to 8 months. I need to take care of these things. And so he gave me 3 weeks to prepare, and I turned myself into the county jail.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 30 days came and went, and I was still sitting there. And he told me they're just waiting for a bed to be available. They're just waiting for a bed to be available. So I missed Thanksgiving, and then Christmas came, and everybody kept telling me, well, they won't pick you up till after Christmas. They won't pick you up till after Christmas. And I kept contacting probation and saying, what's going on? And they kept telling me, oh, we're just waiting for a bed. We're just waiting for a bed.
So you're sitting in county jail waiting for a bed in a rehabilitation center
Yes.
instead of at home while waiting to go to a rehabilitation center.
Yes.
Mm.
So I missed Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then they said, oh, they don't transport people the week between Christmas and New Year's. Okay, so then I missed New Year's. And I mean,
Yeah.
the probation department is next door to the jail. I mean, you're less than a football field from the entrance to the jail to the probation department building and office and everything
Yeah.
else. And I'm calling, I'm sending emails, my mom's calling, my attorney's calling, and they can't talk to me. Um, Still getting the same response. We're waiting. It's in their hands now. And mind you, none of this time counts. So
Oh,
every month
wow.
that goes on, okay, and they're still telling me at this point that I'm going to get a 6-month treatment. So then January comes around, and my attorney's pretty livid by this point. And, because I've already been incarcerated for over 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, my youngest was only 6. And my mom's having to take care of my children and my dad and my house, and all my bills are racking
Yeah.
up, and my boss is holding my job thinking that I'm going to be gone for 6 to 8 months. And on January 13th, My attorney gets an email and the nurse comes in to see me to tell me that they won't accept me on my blood pressure medication. Now, they have had a list of my medication since I began probation. On when my probation was revoked and I was told to go to Safe P in lieu of my full sentence, they again got another copy of all of my medications and gave that to Safe P. When I was booked into the jail, when I was incarcerated in county,
Yeah.
they get all my medications because they have to give them to me.
Yes.
But I'm told now, after already waiting for over 2 months, that they can't accept me. Well, I've been on my blood pressure medicine for quite a number of years, and I'm non-reactive to a lot of other medications, or they make me sick.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or they make me so tired I can't function, and I didn't want to not be able to function going to a rehabilitation program. I
Yeah.
wanted to get the most out of what I was going to experience. So my doctor and my attorney contacted probation and said, she's tried all these other medications. She can't change her medication. She needs to be on this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Friday afternoon at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, the probation officer shows up at the jail and tells me that if I don't quit taking my medication, that I'm in violation, and he's going to go ahead and ask for the sentence to be enforced and I go to prison. So I quit taking my medication. I get sick against my doctor's advice, because of course I can contact my physician from jail.
Mm-hmm.
And I quit taking my medication. The nurse gets there Monday morning and, says, what's going on? You're at stroke level. We're going to have to take you to the emergency room. And we tried a couple other medications, and I finally got on one that kept it, low enough that I wasn't in danger, but it
Okay.
was still at an unhealthy level. And, because prolonged, even if it's low, but, above the normal range, is not healthy for the human body.
So you stopped taking your medication against your doctor's will because, or against your doctor's orders, because your probation officer says it's keeping you from going into the program that they want you to go into.
Yes.
So they're not really even paying attention to your health. They just want
No.
to get you in, but they still don't have a bed for you. So once they finally decide where you're supposed to go, like what does that look like?
Well, that didn't happen for another month and a half. I found out from the nurse at the prison that the probation officer had submitted my paperwork 5 times because he kept doing it incorrectly. And he admitted that to my attorney and somewhat apologized. And, of course, I said, okay, well, can you apologize to my family and my children? Like, I'm okay with this because it is what is.
Yeah.
But I mean, somebody needs to explain it to my 6-year-old daughter that now I'm going to be an extra 4 months. So now I'm looking at 10 months. Okay. So finally the day comes and I get to go to, I think I'm going to the Burnett unit.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in the car and we drive through Burnett, and I ask the officer where we're going. And he says, oh, you're going to Gatesville. Okay. Um, I'm concerned at this point because I don't know anything about the Gatesville unit.
Yeah.
I had done some research on the Burnett unit. Um, and certain kinds of anxiety medications aren't allowed, which I was on. And I couldn't
Mhm.
take those anymore. And my blood pressure medication wasn't working very effectively. So I again start getting ill.
Yeah.
And due to raised blood pressure from the stress of not knowing where I'm going, I get to Woodman, which is the intake unit there in Gatesville for women.
Mm-hmm.
And they're checking me in, and I'm talking to the girl, and I said, is this a special needs unit? And she said, oh no, the special needs unit is in Henley. That's which is down Houston area.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, so I'm still going to a 6-month treatment as far as I know. Well, we do the intake and all this stuff, and they send me I ended up staying on a G4, G5 wing for a night with no medication, even though
What is
all
the
of
G4, G5 wing?
that's a G5 is the worst classification that you can get in prison. It's the highest level of security.
Okay.
You're on complete lockdown except for showers. And you might get rec. I don't know. People are under this misconception that you get rec all the time in prison.
No, you don't.
No, I mean it's very rare. So I mean I can count probably on my hands how many times I was offered rec during the time that I was incarcerated, which was almost a
And
year. So
yeah,
um it was the scariest thing. And then did not have my medication, and I had taken over $500 worth of medication to the prison with me, so I couldn't figure out why they couldn't give it to me. And I went
yeah,
over all my medications with the nurse during the intake process. Um, and then I start talking to the other girls that are there, and they're like, "No, we're going to a 9-month program at Hackberry, and then there's 3 months halfway house afterwards." And I'm like, "No, no, I signed for 6 months." And there was another girl there.
yeah.
There were 12 of us that came in together from different units all over the
Okay.
state. And she had also been told that she was doing a 6-month program. So she and I were going to wait until we talked to the counselors at the unit when we got to the treatment facility, which is
Mm-hmm.
a prison. But in the
It's
meantime,
me being very specific. It is not a treatment center. It is a unit at Gatesville Prison for women that works with substance abuse, but it is still a prison, not a rehabilitation center.
no, it's not a rehabilitation center. And I'll get into a little more of that
Okay.
in a minute when I go over what they offer and what's available, because there's very, very little. It's very limited, and in the time of COVID, it's even more restrictive as to what they'll give you and what
Yeah.
you're allowed to partake in. Um, so I got there, and it was just straight prison. There were no classes, and the girl was like, "Well, you're gonna get a paper. We have 4 hours of work a day." And so you get like a little paragraph for each hour, which I mean takes about maybe 5 minutes to answer each question.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not allowed to sleep, you're not allowed to lay down, you're really not allowed to leave your bunk at that point, because of COVID. So you have to wear a mask if your head is above your cubicle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can't go anywhere except for to the nurse, to chow, and to laundry.
Yeah.
I think those are like the only places that you're allowed to go. And luckily, the girl whose bunk was next to mine was very kind and helped me. I think I cried for the first week. They're supposed to do your intake within 24 hours and explain the program to you so that you can refuse it if you don't want to take it. But of course, refusing the program means accepting the prison sentence.
Yeah.
So when I talked to her, the woman who did my intake, who ended up being the last counselor I had, I went through 8, 9 counselors. I don't know. They're constantly shifting people
Uh-huh.
because they're very short staffed. They're operating at about 30% capacity because nobody wants to work there.
Yeah.
Um,
I wonder why.
yeah, can't imagine.
Yeah.
I think they're lied to as much as we are going into it.
I believe that because I've had some conversations with some of the officers because as you know, I would drive out there 2.5 hours to share the sound healing classes where we met. And I would ask them, like, hey, there's a roster and there's supposed to be a certain amount of people showing up, and I only have 2 people showing up. So what's happening here? And there were very different stories and very disgruntled behaviors that I experienced with people as well. And again, like they're just doing their best with what they have too, because they don't know what's going on. They're not told to the last minute sometimes. And
Mm-mm.
then they work mandatory overtime, 20 hours a day sometimes. And it's like, okay, now you have a bunch of individuals housed here who are disgruntled and in a space that they don't want to be. And now you have people working here who are disgruntled and not being in a space they want to be. And that's really a big recipe for even more chaos, right?
Yes. I experienced more fighting, more trauma
Hmm.
in this treatment facility than I've ever experienced in my life. And I've experienced some unpleasant things throughout my experience here.
Yeah.
In this journey in this life. And yeah, it was I was mind blown. So when I did finally get to do my intake, um luckily I actually got one of the licensed LCDCs.
Hmm.
And because most of them are not,
Okay.
most of them are counseling interns. There's only a couple of people that are actually licensed. Most of them are there just to rack up time to move
Doing the
on to something
practicum.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and she just looked at me and she said, "No, this is a 9-month program. They straight up lied to you." And I said, "Okay. So there's no chance of getting out early." No. Um, So, let's see. I've changed my medication. I'm on stuff that's not working. I can't take stuff for insomnia. I mean, all these things. You know, I, I had to really figure out what I was made of,
Yeah.
and we didn't do groups. The treatment that we got was only cognitive. It was supposed to be cognitive behavioral therapy, and luckily in my past experience I've been in therapy for a long time and I've been able to actually do cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
I had a lot of tools, I had a lot of support, I had my sponsor, I had my mom, I had my therapist, I had
Hmm.
a lot of people that were helping me. um there are a lot of women there that don't have any of that,
Yeah.
and the only classes that were offered when I arrived was school. So if you didn't have your GED,
Hmm.
you were forced to get it. Of course, unless you're over the age of 55, and then you're not worth educating. Which I thought that was ageism, but nobody seemed to agree with me. Um, because there was actually a girl that moved in and she wanted to get her GED. She's like, "I'm here. I want to
Yeah.
do something to better myself," and they wouldn't let her go.
Oh, wow. I
So
mean, you're there, you have the time. Why not?
yeah, you have the time, especially because you're not, I mean, we weren't even allowed to do groups.
Mm.
We literally sat in our 5 by 9 cubicle 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
other than going to medication and to
Which
chow.
is a pity because it's such a beautiful property that that Gatesville is actually located on. Like when I would drive out there, it's such a beautiful countryside, and you have that big grassy area outside of each building to go and like just lay on the grass or to sit in meditation under a tree or to just sit outside and get some fresh air, like. But it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense to me to keep people locked in like that all the time.
And you exercising even in the dorm, because there's a day room. I mean, it's
Yeah.
all one big room, but um, we had to beg for yoga mats, and then once we got them, we had to hide them because they were contraband. We weren't allowed to keep them. I luckily one of the girls gave me hers when she left, and I was able to hold on to that and hide that for my entire time there. And the guards knew that I did the yoga and they didn't give me a hard time about it. But I made the most of the situation that I could.
Yeah. And then,
But
well,
yeah, so after,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was gonna say, after about a month, we finally had like a group or two.
Hmm.
Which is where you sit, they called it stadium style, where all the chairs are facing the counselor, and you're all 6 feet apart supposedly, and basically you get a lecture. They read from a piece of paper. They're not prepared. um Clients or inmates, which I think we were inmates or offenders. There was some big deal about what we were supposed to be called. I never
Yeah.
figured that part out.
Yeah.
um they would prepare the groups for the counselors, when we had them, and half the time they were missing information. I mean, these poor counselors had no resources,
Mm-hmm.
none whatsoever. Um, and it was very restrictive as to what we were allowed to talk about and what we weren't.
Mm-hmm.
Even in process group, I mean, you're supposed to have process group, but you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, you can't say the word God. That I literally got sanctioned for saying the word God instead of using the word higher power.
Mm-hmm.
um it
So
it
really, you're
was
not able to express yourself freely, even though you are supposed to be processing through the emotions or the feelings that are coming up in these groups.
right, and we're supposed to be examining triggers and looking at how we can become healthy, and but we couldn't process anything. You could not talk about trauma because no one there was licensed to handle anything but substance abuse.
Okay.
So I would say almost every woman there was experienced some sort of trauma that led to substance abuse in one form or another.
Yeah.
But you couldn't bring that up. You
So
couldn't.
So as you were going through these different classes that were happening kind of sporadically and not very consistently, and like a handful compared to what you were supposed to be experiencing, I know that you started to be vocal about like starting something yourself, and I know that you were running some different classes for with
Yes.
your peers. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So myself and a couple other women were fortunate enough. I was gifted the experience to train as a peer educator, is what they call it.
Okay.
So I spent a week at the big girl prison, as they call it. I was over at Riverside. Um, and they only do this about once every 10 years. And
Oh wow!
Hackberry,
So the timing, amazing.
amazing. And the experience really changed my life. It really did. I I took classes to learn how to teach other inmates. And it's a program that's run at certain other units or satellites, as they call them, and they offer a variety of classes. A lot of it is health education,
Hmm.
particularly HIV, hepatitis, communicable diseases, any of the STIs and that type of
Okay.
thing, because the rates of HIV and hepatitis in the incarcerated population is much higher than the general public.
Okay.
So that's really where it starts. And then from that, you also offer suicide classes, and it's a way for the prison system to have peers teach people. It may save money. I don't know, because you also teach the PREA,
Yeah.
which is the Prison Rape Elimination Act,
Hmm.
and you teach the weather classes. So for hot and cold temperature exposure,
Hmm.
so you teach those. And then they've added other classes, and it was a couple of women who developed this program to go into prisons and offer education based training. A lot of it was back, when Magic Johnson did a lot of this stuff for HIV, and
Okay.
to educate the population, because that particular demographic, especially HIV, a lot of them would think it was a death sentence, and it's very stigmatized.
Hmm.
But with medication, usually you can stay healthy.
Okay.
And in prison, with prison rapes, with relationships, that type of thing, STIs are rampant in prison.
Yeah, because there's no protection that you can get there. Hmm.
No, I mean, they steal latex gloves and trash bags. I mean, that's,
But that doesn't
um,
really work. Yeah.
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 So, not healthy things. And so we also were able to create our own classes tailored to our unit. So we did drug and alcohol awareness. We did reentry classes, which was another program they developed, which was a wonderful program. It was a lot of fun, and I learned so much from the women over at the real prison.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, if you ever think that people incarcerated can't be happy or they're the worst of the bunch, I mean, I met amazing humans that, despite what they've been through, shine through and help other people, and they don't get rewarded for it. It's just because they love helping other people, and it
Hmm.
helps them stay positive in a negative environment, and that is their family.
Yeah,
And
that's their community.
yeah, that's their community, and they want to make their community better. And so it was an amazing experience, and no one at the unit that I was at had ever been allowed to attend. And one of the guards I saw fairly regularly, and I kept asking her about it because I wanted to take classes, because I already had a GED.
Hmm.
I wasn't offered any classes. They supposedly offer a health and wellness class and a parenting program and some OSHA certifications. But I mean, I regularly applied like once a month, and I could never get into any of them.
Hmm,
And
interesting.
yeah, and part of my some of the community service work that I was supposed to do was take some of those educational classes.
But you couldn't get into them.
No. And I talked to everybody I thought I was supposed to talk to, and I just kept getting denied. You're on a waiting list. You're on a waiting list. You're on a waiting list. And people that were coming in after me were getting into the programs, and I don't know what they did that I didn't
Mhm.
do, but
Yeah,
the universe was just opening a different opportunity for me.
yeah.
So
So
I had
how long did you teach these or share these classes, which with as a peer educator? Was it the whole time you were there?
no, because I didn't get to take the class until I'd been there about 5 months.
Okay.
Um,
So then for
and
about 5 more months, you taught the class.
yes, well, and it wasn't exactly that. It took us about a month to even be allowed to teach them.
Okay.
They wanted us to teach PREA because that was a mandatory class that is required by the state of Texas. So
Yeah.
we could teach that, but we couldn't teach anything else.
Okay.
And so we just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And anybody who knows me will tell you I'm nothing if not persistent and vocal. I'm not quiet,
Yeah.
but it took me a long time to find my voice, and I wanted to use it for good.
Hmm.
And I did. And so we ended up teaching 5 to 6 days a week and offering a lot of classes. They were full. It was a month-long waiting list.
Did that help you keep your sanity?
Yes. Yes. And the response that we got from the classes and from the other educators, I mean, I trained a lot of other educators while I was there because everybody has to find their footing, and everybody has to find what works for them. So out of the six of us that were gifted the opportunity to go learn and take these classes, only one girl stayed with me. So it was the two of us that got all this off the ground. And then we picked people. We developed an application process and a training process and all that. And the officer that was in charge of education gave us a classroom because they had several empty classrooms that weren't being used for anything.
Hmm.
And so she said, well, here, decorate it. And she bought us supplies out of her own pocket. And I mean, she gave us everything we used. She made certificates for us.
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely amazing. And it was an oasis. It was a safe space for us to be able to speak freely and to
Hmm.
learn and to ask the hard questions. And in there, we could talk about suicide.
Yeah.
We could talk about depression, because that was another thing, is that I'm at a special needs unit for people with mental disabilities and health problems,
Hmm.
because they're supposed to have a 24-hour on-call nurse. The on-call nurse is on the Crane satellite, not on the Hackberry unit.
Yeah.
So if you have any kind of crisis, they just load you up in an ambulance and take you to the emergency room. I mean, there's nobody on call.
Yeah. I think I only saw the nurse there a handful of times too.
Yeah, so that was a joke.
Hmm.
Um, and anytime I did have any sort of health problem, I had to go to another unit, or they send you to Galveston because it's more cost effective somehow to transport an inmate to Galveston for an ultrasound or an
But
x-ray.
that's like a 6 hour drive.
easily from Gatesville. I mean, I don't know, you're loaded up on a bus and
Yeah, from
handcuffed.
Gates. Yeah, it's about 6 hours.
Yeah, I mean, there was a girl with a broken arm, and they never fixed her arm. I mean, she went to Galveston, I don't know how many times, and that's a traumatic unit. I mean, that's a traumatic journey because again, you're housed with the segregated G4, G5,
Which is the maximum
um,
security. Yeah,
maximum security. And these are people where they keep the lights on 24/7. You don't sleep. They scream the
yeah.
entire time because there's a lot of them there with severe,
Mental
um,
illness.
yeah, severe mental illness.
So this is like the question that I have like moving forward for our criminal justice system too, and for the part around mental health and illness, because we used to have places where people could be taken care of, and those a lot of those institutions were closed down because of the things that were happening to people in those spaces. And the jails became the new space for people with mental illness to go because we don't have anywhere else to house them. They're either homeless or they're in the jail or they're in a halfway house. And then the people who are working in the jails are not prepared or equipped or educated or know how to deal with or manage the types of mental illness that people are experiencing. So I'm wondering, in Austin, the Austin State Hospital is building this huge new wing. Some of the guys that live on my property, where I'm out in Red Rock, they were installing all the windows on the facility. And I said, wow, well, what are they going to be doing with this new wing? And they didn't seem to know. And I thought, wow, that's interesting that they're building this whole new part of the hospital. It's a state hospital. Like, are they going to allow people to be housed there and be taken care of in a proper way, or to be in a humane way? So I'm
I
curious to
didn't
know.
I did not see much humane treatment of people with mental differences.
Mhm.
Schizophrenia is rampant. Dissociative identity, multiple personalities is also very common
Yeah.
in people with addicts. A lot of people tend to self-medicate with
Hmm.
substances
Yeah.
because they don't have access to health care, especially mental health care.
Yeah.
And I watched people self-harm on a regular basis and not get treatment or help. And that was one of the reasons that we taught a self-harm and suicide awareness class, because they didn't tell us how to deal with those types of things.
Yeah.
And when they do lock people up, like let's say someone tries to harm themselves,
Hmm.
they send you to Ice House, which is a unit. I mean, that's the nickname. They call it Ice House because it's cold and they often don't give you blankets or bedding. There's not even a toilet in there. It's a hole in the floor. If you're on your menstrual cycle, you have no products. Yeah, no blanket, no mat, no nothing. And you
Because
sit there for 72 hours. That's your 72-hour hold.
they're afraid you're going to use some of those items to either hang yourself or do some harm to yourself.
Hmm.
Gotcha.
I didn't experience that, but I know people that did.
Okay. Well, that
Because
doesn't sound
people
like it would
come
be very
in.
conducive to feeling safer.
No, quite the opposite. And there were a lot of people at the unit where I was where they were afraid to speak up about their depression or how terrible they felt, or
For fear of being
um
put there.
yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes. And this again was a special needs unit for people with psychiatric problems.
Hmm.
But to get to see psych was, I mean, it was a
Yeah, how does
joke.
that work when you want to actually, because they say that they do offer therapy or a therapist, but what is the process for that?
There was a guy that was there when I started, but he wasn't really a therapist. He was like a previewer, like you would go in and talk to him, and he would see if you qualified to see the psychiatrist.
Okay.
And
So you had to be a certain level of out there in order to actually get seen.
yes.
Gotcha.
And you could drop medical requests when they were supposed to be answered within 72 hours, but that was not, I mean, that was not the case.
Hmm.
Um, he left, and once he left, then we had to go to another unit for psychiatric care. And they had the same kind of people. But the one girl, I mean, my depression worsened while I was there.
Mhm.
And I've been on medication for depression since I was 17. And I've learned that I have to stay medicated or I
Yeah.
don't feel right. And so I asked to have my medication increased. And I mean, you would have thought I had asked to like walk out the front door, like, can you just let me out? I mean, it was so hard. And I had to see psych 5 or 6 times. And there was one lady that they kept sending me to. And I actually filed a grievance against her because every time I went, she handed me a coping skill paper and she gave me the same paper every time and said, use your coping skills.
Hmm. Yes. It doesn't
Uh,
sound like much of a solution or giving you a whole bunch of tools or anything else that you could consider in order to change what you were experiencing. Well, I'd like to ask what you started to notice differently when you started to attend the sound healing meditations and what that looked like for you in coordination with what the like the peer education classes you were teaching and what you were doing on your own to support yourself. What changed there and what started to shift?
um, I think me constantly fighting the system for better treatment and not being quiet. I don't know how to say this. When you came in and started teaching and doing the meditation and the sound healing, I began to get more confidence. I felt before that because it's a very negative environment.
Yeah.
And even the groups that we attended when we did attend them, which was less than half the time, were very negative. A lot of the people that teach them are very jaded. They think that addicts are bad, and because we're in prison, we're just bad people.
Mm-hmm. Or that it's
Uh,
hopeless.
It was a very hopeless feeling, and everything I felt through the classes that everything I did was wrong, and I couldn't do anything right, and it was a very crippling. I felt I was never going to get better.
Okay.
So through the classes and the sound healing, it helped me open to other possibilities, that there is a possibility for healing and that I can get better. And I slowly found my group of people that could be supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people that I was in class with you, because it was optional for us and we didn't get any accolades for going to class, it attracts a certain type of person. And with the energy clearing, I think I was able to attract more of the right people. And that's luckily continued into the space that I'm in now. That's something that I'm grateful to have carried with me. I think it breaks up some of that ickiness that's in there, some of that dark that needs to be released
Yeah.
to bring in the new and the fresh and the light. And I was also allowed to protect, and I was able to change the way I said things and the way I looked at things
Mm-hmm.
instead of viewing it from a negative stance that I need to repel and I need to push that away. I could look at it. What can I take? What do I want to absorb? And what do I not want to take on? What's mine? What do I own here? Um, and I got to learn a lot about what was other people's.
Yeah.
And I began to see the difference between, okay, this is mine, this is my part, and that's their part, and I don't have anything to do with it. So it was an extension of what I was doing in my own recovery. And as I said, I was so blessed because I had a family that supported me that I could
Yeah.
call every day. I had a sponsor who set up her phone and mailed us AA books because we couldn't get AA books in the unit.
Wow.
And she helped me sponsor other women while I was there. And we eventually did get AA meetings once a month, if the people could come in and show up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, It's very hard for outsiders to be able to come in. And even if they show up with all the appropriate paperwork, if the sergeant on duty is unhappy and doesn't want to deal with it,
Yeah.
they don't get to come in.
Yeah.
And that to me seemed very counterproductive for people that are supposed to be in a treatment facility to not have AA and NA.
Yeah. Especially if people, because for Gatesville too, because it's such a far out facility, people are usually driving a distance to get there to offer the classes. And I don't feel like the people working there realize that sometimes, like how much effort it takes to get there and then to be present there and then to actually like get people to the classes, right? Because they're the ones in charge of releasing people to come to the classroom. So again, like you said, if they're
That
having
in
a
and of
bad day, you're at their
itself,
mercy.
yeah, and that in and of itself was a battle. I mean, I know with classes when I took you, like there was one officer that she just didn't want to leave the picket to go unlock the door to call people out. And I don't know how many classes and opportunities I missed because she was overworked and tired and didn't want to deal with it. And the officers, some of the officers are great.
Yeah. It's
And
not
then
all
some
of
of
them.
them,
Let's be specific or be clear there. Like it's not all of them. Most of the officers that I work with, after I get to know them a little bit and I build a rapport, then it makes it easier for me to ask them like, "Hey, I've got the roster. I'm missing like 5 people. Could you call them out by their name at that station?" So that way the guard knows specifically to let them out and then it makes them be more accountable as well.
right. And even when you do that, there are still some officers that just won't do it.
Yeah.
And so that part, that the inconsistency in that
Hmm.
was it was amazing to me, and saying we're trying to get healthy, but you can't go to rec, you can't exercise, you might get church once a week,
Hmm.
and even if they did call it, you may or may not be able to go classes. Yeah, maybe. Um, so that was a varied
So
experience. It was wild.
the inconsistency, yeah, is definitely a challenge because we can't do anything consistently. We can't create a new habit or a new routine or a new way of being. So with that being said, as we wrap this up, I'd like to get your ideas or your thoughts about how you see or how you'd like to see the criminal justice system changing in the next year to 5 years.
I think what I want to see in the next year to 5 years is probably improbable, but
But no, it
uh,
doesn't matter. Just say it.
punishment doesn't work. Separating people from their loved ones does not work. If you don't have the incentive to do it, it was a very punishment based program. And tell on your brothers and sisters for thinking wrong. It was very big brother. And I think that a supportive and healing environment is what needs to be done. And if you can't address the trauma and heal, I don't know how they expect people to get better.
Yeah, I feel you there.
And if if people aren't allowed to be open and be accepted for who they are and what they're feeling, then we're not allowed to process, and we're never going to move forward because we stay stuck in
Yeah.
that negative energy. We're not able to release it. Um, meditation is huge, and being able to feel and express ourselves. I mean,
Hmm.
we're supposed to have therapy. What about some other modalities? We weren't allowed to have music. We weren't allowed to do yoga. We weren't.
Yeah.
I'm so many things. It just doesn't make sense. Let people have paints and colors, and shoot, just let people go outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's a big thing. Just to be
you
able
know,
to go outside and get some fresh air and put your feet on the ground.
I remember when we were on lockdown for COVID, and then an inmate escaped at another unit. It was a male unit, didn't have anything to do with this, but we were on lockdown for almost 30 days.
Oh,
Which
wow.
means, yeah, and they brought chow to us. We couldn't even leave to go to chow. The only time you could leave is if you had a medical emergency. And one day the guard was nice enough when they brought us ice to let us walk just outside the dorm. And I collected a handful of grass and brought it back to my bunk just to smell it,
Yes.
because
Yes.
just that. And the no touch facility, like I get, but
Hmm.
the lack of human connection is definitely hard.
Yeah.
And I think that was one thing that made the sound healing so nice, is because you can feel the vibrations in your body. So
Hmm.
you're feeling something physical,
Yeah.
because we missed out on so much of that. And yeah, to wrap up, I was just going to say, so yeah, my 9 month stay turned into 11 months because the halfway house was closed. And then I spent 2 months there before I actually got to come home. So
And so now you've been home for 3 weeks. Yeah.
yes, yes.
I'm so excited that you are out in the free world, and I'm so excited to be in contact with you here too, and to um, plan to create new things together, and to bring sound healing, bring some of like what you taught in the peer educator classes too into whatever we create together in the future, to just to bring awareness to our general population about the challenges that people experience through incarceration, and the things that happen through the inconsistencies or the miscommunications that are never addressed, and or not addressed always, and given uh, giving people more than what they signed up for, or not knowing what they signed up for.
Right. I think if there was a little more transparency in what was actually being gotten, and I fought that a lot, and my attorney um continued to contact the director of Safe and I had one counselor that would be like, "We're getting audited again, Boykin," because they knew that
Good.
it was me. But they hired twice as much staff after my attorney kept calling.
That's amazing.
And yeah, I mean, but it was a fight. But that was one thing I said when I left is, one of the classes we taught, the closing question of the class was, "What legacy do you want to leave?"
Hmm.
And I said, "I just want to leave someplace a little better than I found it." And I think in order for me to do that and to still feel good about what I'm doing is to educate people,
Yeah.
because most people don't know that this is the experience in the criminal justice system. I mean,
Yeah.
my father's a judge and he's retired now, but he has no idea that once they got on that side until he experienced it with me. And
Hmm.
people are just dumbfounded, like that's what it's really like. And it's a sad scenario for people that really need and want help. They accepted to go to the program thinking they were going to get treatment, and then really didn't get anything except for blindly follow the rules so that you can get out on time. And did you really learn anything?
And in the process, you're learning how to become an incarcerated individual instead of being rehabilitated.
Right. It was not rehabilitative at all. I found a lot of peace because I reached out and tried to find a lot of things that would work for
Yeah.
me because I wanted to heal.
Yes,
Uh,
and a lot of people don't have that mental capacity that are incarcerated at the moment. It's not to say that they are not intelligent; they just were not brought up that way, or they didn't have that education when they were younger. So, I would argue one point, or not argue. I would make one point to say, like, the rehabilitation that you experienced was because you chose to, right?
yes.
Because you saw another way, and you found a way to bring more information and um, knowledge into that space through your own experience and through your own wisdom. And
Yes.
I really love that you were able to bring that energy of healing into that space through what you knew and in the best way that you knew. And now that you're out, you get to share that in a different way and bring awareness to people who may not be aware of what's going on or what actually occurs on a regular basis in our criminal justice system.
Yeah, and I think it's so hard, especially, and I don't know how it is for men because I don't have that experience, but women that have been abused
Mm-hmm.
so often end up in the system, and then you're in a program that continues to tell you that you're bad.
Yeah.
And so they don't have the opportunity to see anything different. And so then they stay in that space. And I wanted something different, so I fought for something different, and I wanted to bring that to other people because it's not their fault that they don't know.
Yes.
that they can have a different experience,
Hmm.
and or that it's okay to be angry because of what you've been through, and that you can heal, and you don't have to just keep ending up back in the system.
Yeah.
Because the recidivism for these programs is over 85%, and they know it, and they're not doing anything differently.
Wow. I didn't realize the rate was that high for return.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes, and people that do peer education and that do programs like Bridges to Life and stuff like that, it reduces that rate of recidivism. But those programs are so hard to get into,
Mhm.
and they're so infrequently offered, that it's really sad, and people aren't given the opportunity, even though they think that's what they're getting when they sign up, because that's what they're told.
Yeah.
Because I think some probation officers believe that. But there's no way somebody's been a probation officer for 30 years and has been sending people to Safe P and knows that it's messed up,
Yeah.
So I mean, they know there's a need for reform, but I think everybody's hands are tied, and there's a lot of red tape, and
So
I
we're
think
looking at
overworked and
shifting.
exhausted,
Yeah.
and they can't do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy that you were able to be a mirror and to find your own footing and to share what felt best for you and to create what felt best for you in an experience that was not so gentle or loving. I'm really happy and grateful that I got to meet you, and I'm really excited to see what we get to create together and on our own in the future. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your story and for being here.
Yes, thank you very much. You have been a continuous light. I looked forward to you constantly coming and validating me and loving me as another human. I very much appreciate you helping me see who I am, and I look forward to what we're gonna do next.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Allison. Be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you.